Hi, this is Cajsa Carlson, Deputy Editor of Dezeen, and I'm broadcasting live from the Dezeen studio space in London. Today, we've teamed up with flooring design firm Tarkett to discuss sustainability and circularity in design. I'm joined today by Florian Bougault, Design Director at Tarkett EMEA. Hi, Florian.
Hello, Cajsa.
Nice to see you. And we're also joined by Mirza Rasidovic, who's the range engineering leader at IKEA. Hi, Mirza.
Hello, Cajsa.
Thanks for joining us. And also joining us today are Flavien, or should I say is Flavien Menu, who is the co-founder of WALD. Hi, Flavien.
Hello.
Nice to see you. And so you're all joining us today, and I know that you've all prepared a presentation on your work. So I'm hoping that, Florian, if you could start by sharing your presentation with us, that would be amazing.
Use my screen okay?
Yes, it's great. Thank you.
Good. Excellent. So basically, I mean, the theme of today that we're here to talk about around the table is about circularity and how that's basically impacting our businesses, our industrial work, and our daily work as designers around the table. So basically, I mean, I'm part of a large company called Tarkett. We are manufacturing flooring and wall materials for the architecture industry. And of course, we're industrial. And I think what's important to know about being an industrial company is that it's time for, let's say, action. It's not a matter of change. It's not a matter of thinking. It's a matter for action. One important data, of course, is the overshoot data. This year is July 29th. That tells a lot about the urgency of the situation. And not to mention, of course, the IPCC, who has released quite a number of information about how difficult it's going to be to reach the 1.5 degree of temperature raise. So there's a lot of things to do. And if we look back at the way we're basically dealing with this, all is in about how much carbon emission do we make? And here you have a little quick view of how Tarkett emits CO2 today. And of course, we have energy for manufacturing, we have transportation, but then when you look at the right side of the screen, you see that the processing of raw materials, that means extracting raw materials, counts for 45% of our carbon emissions. And when it comes to end of use, 30% of our carbon emissions are coming from incineration, for example. So what it means, like 75% of our carbon emissions are linked to materials that we extract or deal with end of life. And the idea for us right now is really to consider this amount of materials, either for extraction or for incineration, as a source of potential for reducing CO2. This is where we need to tap in. And this is where, circularity comes in. So our vision really is about to make sure that we get as much as possible materials that are already used out there. I mean, basically the potential for material that we could recycle is everywhere around us. And our philosophy is really to tap into that, to do so. It goes together with a very simple definition of what recycling is about. It's the ISO definition, and the ISO definition is very simple. Like, how can you reach to these potential of material? How can you logistically take them from where they are? And second, once they come back to you, your ability to recycle them and make new materials out of it. So that's really very simple, and this is why we're following with our circular principles. So what we call circular selection, which is basically all the materials that we're in capacity to actually take back from where they're being installed today and then process them to make new materials out of them. So that's really is the key. So again, there's the consideration, and this is just important for people to understand that this is an industrial challenge, really. I mentioned the logistics. I mentioned I mentioned the science that's behind how to treat post-use material. But then more than that, there's also all that consideration of what's in there. And of course, we can't recycle everything because we don't want to recycle everything because we have evolved in the past years. And for instance, since 2011, our materials are phthalate-free. I mean, we don't have any phthalates. Phthalates are kind of plasticizers that we use in vinyl products. And they are phthalate-free now for about 10 years. And we don't want to get back some phthalate-free materials back into our system because that would pollute it, so to speak. So there's also some science behind that to sorting and probably maybe in the future to be able to separate the phthalate from what we can collect. So that's really what the future comes for us. So there's a lot of challenges at scale. We're talking about a massive amount of material that we need to treat. And that's really the hope that we have for the future. And I'm going to give you a few examples of those material that we are considering. You need to understand that this circular selection is basically comprised of different types of material. Here is an example of what we call LVT, or it's vinyl tiles. These are clickable materials, so it's interesting because when you remove them, there's no deposit of glue or concrete, so it's very easy to recycle. And these LVT, for instance, we're talking about like per square meter, something like 20 kg of equivalent CO2. If you make that equivalent to a store that would be 100 square meters using that LVT material, it would be an equivalent of, let's say, something like 2 tons saved. And that means something like a forest of 30 trees that would be planted today and that would grow for 10 years. So just to give an equivalent of what it means. So this is one example of the materials that we have, but they are very different from one category to the next. For example, if you start talking about other materials like homogeneous vinyl, these are vinyls that actually IKEA knows very well as they use it quite extensively, but it's a material that's being used in a lot of hospitals, in a lot of schools, very robust material, very let's say, durable. And that material is glued down on the floor. So when we take it back, we shred it, of course, in pieces, but then we need to clean those things in a proper way so that we can get rid of, for example, the glue or some concrete residues. And that's also a matter of science, it's a matter of industrial processing. And that's just a huge part of what we say circular economy. And this is a big part of what we are doing today. We also have some other kinds of material that we have in the circular selection that we can actually collect after it's used in the real life. And one of them is linoleum. So for those who don't know, linoleum is a very interesting material because it's the ancestor of vinyl. It's a 100% natural material, raw material based. As it's made out of wood flour, it's made out of cork powder, rosin, and also some, of course, linen seed oil. That's the name where it comes from. That means linoleum, oleum of linen. And so this material is interesting because it's very effective in terms of CO2 emissions because the CO2 is already trapped in this formulation. So we can get to a very low CO2, let's say, impact when using that kind of material. Plus, it's very nice and beautiful and with very interesting colors. Another type of things that we're processing, and it's a bit more complex as we go, is when we have several materials that are made out of different types of materials, like we call them composites. And one very good example is the carpet tile that we manufacture in Holland. So of course you have the textile, and textile for us generally is made out of PA6. And then we have the backing, which is basically the sole, where basically you entangle the textile into it to make the carpet. And that backing generally is made out of polyolefin, which is a different type of plastic as what PA6 is. So basically one first step when logistically taking back those tiles from offices or any other type of space around the Europe or the world, then you need to separate those two materials. One side is going to be the fiber, and the other side is going to be the sole or the backing. We call it the backing. And basically, as you can see it, we get these big, clumps of fiber. Then these fiber is then taken back to our fiber supplier, Aquafil, and they can polymerize the PA6 into a totally new one. So this is really interesting. So, and on the other side, we can shred and make the sole and the backing and make a totally new carpet tile out of it. So really interesting that these are just a few examples of the different technologies, the different processes that we need to put in place so that we can actually take back the material after they've been used, treat them, process them, and make new ones out of them. So each time it's a different challenge, each time it's a different logistics, and that's really interesting. But it's a challenge, definitely. It doesn't happen overnight. And that's the reason why when we talk about the circular selection today, we are talking about only a part of the collection we're making. Not because the other ones are not possible, it's just that the plant or the industrial manufacturing that's behind it is not there up to pace, up to speed to actually be able to process all that. But of course, we are putting all the investment in this. We are very happy to have that circular selection grow. So today it's not ridiculous, it's like something like 30% of our sales for what we call the contract business for professionals. So it's a massive amount of the capability that we have today to make circular a big part of our sales, and this is going to grow in the coming, I would say, month and years. Of course, that's our goal. One very good example is IKEA. Mirza certainly knows about this example. This happened, I think, this spring when we collected from the Curve store that's in Sweden, like something like 10,000 square meters of used vinyl flooring from like homogeneous, as you can see here. And we reprocessed that one, and a few weeks or months later, we installed these equivalent 10,000 square meters into another store. That's the, sorry for the pronunciation, Jokopink store of IKEA. And basically the idea was that we managed to capture 1,500 tons, 100 tons of CO2. That's an equivalent of 1,500 trees that I mentioned earlier. Well, like to get an idea of the impact of that, and that's really a very tangible example of how things now are moving, not just on our side, and we have our share of what needs to be done, but also from our customer side, where they also need to onboard the way they use our products and the way they can also return them to us. What's important as well for us to understand is that once the material goes back, and this is all they say the back office story, but then also we need to address let's say the purpose of our clients using our material. That means the aesthetics, the ergonomics, the functionality, the resistance in time, and we do that. And to, let's say, make this story of circularity and of these recycling materials and recyclable materials tangible, we want also to make them, look how you can use them. And this is what the Play is about. Play magazine is a magazine that we did like every 1 or 2 years. And here we definitely want to show how our materials could be potentially used in some scenographies. And this year we worked together with Note Design Studio. It's a Swedish-based design agency, and basically we worked together with them by using only materials that were selected in the circular selection I just mentioned. And of course, what's interesting is that not only those materials are good for the people or good for the planet, but they're also excellent in terms of other benefits like aesthetics, well-being, comfort. And this is what we actually try to inspire our clients, like architects, designers, and all kinds of users with these different images and scenographies. So you can see there are different horizons of how those material of different kinds from different corners of the circular selection are being used here, from carpets to printed materials to even accessories that you can see here with the welding rods. And this is really the idea to go further in saying, well, we still are inspiring, and actually for us, the philosophy in terms of design is eco-designing, of course, but it's also inspiring and making sure that people are, feel the potential for the spaces that they want to work with. And so you see a few examples here and there of different kinds, either more like object-like or space-like, and you see that this is working very fine. Here you see some linoleum again, and that's it. So thank you very much for these few minutes, and if you have any questions, please, we can talk a bit about that later.
That's wonderful, Florian. Thank you so much. And I should have asked you earlier, but where are you joining us from today?
I'm joining from Paris. Actually, I'm sitting in our atelier. Atelier is our showroom in Paris. There's another one in Stockholm, actually. We have one also in London. So these are really places for gathering and working together with our clients and having materials at hand and showing them all the beautiful things that we could do.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I just have a quick question before we move on to Mirza's presentation. But I was wondering, you're already recycling a certain amount of existing flooring material, but does Tarkett envision in the future that you'll be able to recycle any kind of flooring material? Is there research into all kinds? Because I understand there's a lot of flooring that might be very difficult currently to recycle.
Well, this is definitely our goal. I mean, I think there's, for us as industry, and with, let's say, the ambition that we have, we are putting everything possible so that we can recycle all the materials that we have. We do that like step by step. Again, it's a matter of scale. So we're talking about industrial scale. So it doesn't happen overnight. I think that 30% of what we're selling is already a very good number. And basically, somebody who takes this material today, install them today, and in 10 years says, hey, we're done with that one because it's been used, or we just want to change, then take it back. We can do that from now on for 30% of what we're doing. So that's very interesting. But then there's more there. There's 70% other left. We are very close to increase that number quite significantly. There are some challenges still. We know that, and we're working on them very hard, to be honest. Yes.
That's great. And speaking of industrial and designing at scale, I think that's quite a good lead up to Mirza's presentation. So Mirza, you're the range engineering leader at IKEA. If you could please share your presentation and tell us a bit about what IKEA is doing.
Thank you, Cajsa. I'm glad to do that. And thank you, Florian, for a fantastic presentation. And the great pronunciation of the Swedish words. Do you see my presentation?
Yep.
Super. In IKEA, we are committed and are about to transform into a circular business by 2030. This means that what we want to do is to create a better everyday life for the many people within the boundaries of the planet. We are convinced that sustainability cannot be a luxury for the few. It needs to be democratized, it needs to be affordable, it needs to be accessible for the many people in order for us to have a true impact on planet and our lives. We spend a lot of time to understand, to listen to science, to listen to pair up with different organizations, and to listen to our customers, and also do our research to understand and create facts around things. Customers' behaviors are changing. They're always an emotion, but what we can see here and now is the continuous trends of moving into cities, living in smaller spaces, seeing that the time span is available for people is shortening, where there is a need of instant gratifications, instant answers, and so forth. And even more so, what we see is that the interest, the demands, and the consciousness of sustainability, of environmental questions, and how important it is to have products available that are sustainable, that is increasing tremendously year by year, and tremendous leaps between generations as well. Another thing that we see is also the resource scarcity becoming a true and really tangible fact. It is impacting our business. It's impacting even more the planet, which is even more important. We see that with the scarcity of resources, it is increasing costs, and it is therefore also hindering us to become affordable unless we change. And when it comes to the climate parts, we see that the circular transformation, just as Florian was on to, is very much linked and goes hand in hand with the climate ambitions. In our case, it is about, in accordance to the 1.5 degree goal, to be climate positive by 2030. And here it's about not only about using clean and renewable energy in our supply chain, in our operations, but it's also about the material aspect, recognizing very much what was shared in the presentation before. Material has a huge impact on the carbon footprint, and it's about figuring out ways to step away from virgin and fossil-based materials, reduce the amount of materials, and also looking into how do we apply materials so we do that, to apply right materials in the right way to the right products. Another important aspect is also about prolonging the life of products. We see this as a tremendous and great impact on the carbon footprint, and also treating the materials as the banks for the future. It is about how we design our products and how we integrate with our customers. If you look at our products today, our research shows that in average, our customers are reselling our products 3 times over its lifespan. That is, of course, something that we as a company can support. We can make it easier, and we can push that up as well. So we go away from 3 to something else higher. And this we see is done through a circular business model. It is, of course, about the big loop, the loop which very much goes back down to the materials, starting by using renewable recycled materials, and in the end of life, at some point, be able to recycle those materials. But what is also important for us is what happens in between here. It is about looping the products as much as possible, that they are reused over and over again. And here it becomes about the design and about the services and how we enable that in totality for the customers. All products break at some point, and then it's important also that we can catch that by refurbishment options. So it's simple for the customers and affordable to repair the products, or that there are possibilities to professionally repair the products to an affordable way. And that is going back to the loop over and over again until at some point it is beyond saving. And then that we can at least recover some of the parts to remanufacture that and put them into new products. And of course, material then recover that through recycling, and that it goes into a new product. The design becomes extremely important in order to prolong life. It's about designing to be able to reuse products, that you can care for them, that you can keep them clean, the basics many times. It's also about repurposing products. Our lives are moving on. It's constantly in change. So it's about really enabling the products to be adaptable. You can adapt the function, and that was nothing new, neither for the world nor for IKEA. We have, for example, had storage furniture where you can adapt your function as you want, basically, depending on your storage need. But at the same time, it's about how far do we stretch that? How do we stretch that beyond storage? How can we apply that to a fry pan, to a box, to something else completely, and to really test the boundaries there? It's also about the appearance. How do we make the adaptability of the appearance? For example, to be able to change covers of the sofas, just as you can change the function of the sofas, where you can build modular systems. So it's really about, not necessarily about always thinking about new things, but it's about really pushing things that we know and applying them to a wider scale that we have thought about before. And then also it's about enabling products to be repaired. once again, our kitchens, you have been able to have 25 years warranty, and you're able to repair them and find spare parts. But it's also about other products. How can we apply that to other products, making that accessible, making that simple for the customers, and making that affordable as well. So you prolong the life of the products that you have over and over again, at the same time as you adapt them as the needs change and as life happens, simply. We have created what we call circular design principles that are describing different aspects of the product and how you design for circularity. What we have done is we have assessed all our 9,500 products or so in terms of their circular capabilities. We have also defined what we call circular recipes that basically defines more concretely what is expected from the product in order for it to be circular. It is very different between different products. In some cases, there are many things that are pretty much similar as well. But it is really about meeting up each product on its own terms and the customer needs, and really pushing the boundaries continuously. If we take to share key lessons that we have learned so far, one of them is that there is not one size fits all. A circular bed sheet requires different things than a sofa or a pillow or a plate. So it's really about looking at the product and identifying what makes this product circular. The material aspect is always there and is a very important and contributing part. But there are also other things as well in order to prolong the life of the products. Another part of that is being able to choose renewable recycled materials and also design for recyclability. And here it's about us engaging ourselves with the different industries, looking at different kind of innovation, looking at our behaviors and our decision making, and how do we work with the materials? Do we mix them, making them inseparable and thereby unrecyclable? Or do we work in a different way? Do we work on moving and engaging in development of renewable recycled materials and availability of that, so we get good materials that you can be very creative with, but that are also affordable for the many people? And here it's also about legislations to some extent as well. If you look at the customers today, they are engaging locally, they are engaging regionally, they're engaging globally, and they can do that within the same day without leaving their home. And that is the world today. And for us, it's very important that there is also a legislative attention to harmonizing, for example, definitions on the market. So we also can enable customers that when they are buying new products, that they can compare products, that they can understand what am I buying and what is the sustainability characteristics of this product, what is the footprint, etc., etc. To be able to provide them with information and transparency so they can make conscious decisions. And of course, this is something that needs to happen across country borders, where companies need to take their responsibility and contribute to that, and also internally steer towards a standardization in terms of definitions, in terms of the activities that needs to happen. Sustainability is not about, I think you said it very well, Florian, it's not about thinking, it's not about understanding, it is really about acting. And this is how we see that we can act, starting with circularity, becoming climate positive, working with the materials and working with the design of our product as a base for that, and then much more.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Mirza. I am going to start by asking you the same question I asked Florian. Where are you calling from today?
I'm calling from south of Sweden, a very snowy south of Sweden, Ljungby.
Oh, from Ljungby. Okay, I'm from Malmö, so I'm familiar-ish. And looking at the presentation, one thing that I found quite interesting was, I know IKEA is already doing things like the buyback scheme where people can return furniture they have. You're talking now about the kind of possibility to recycle furniture, remanufacture furniture. imagine that IKEA stores in the future will look slightly different to how they look today, where they might kind of offer these sort of services to customers more.
We are today having a lot of different tests globally in different markets to understand what does a circular business model look like for us, and where can we add value by engaging ourselves. And you have mentioned a couple of them, and we have many more as well. But we are testing out, we are drawing the learnings and trying to make conclusions and what does that mean for us. And here there are a lot of decisions left to be taken and insights to be drawn. So this is kind of an ongoing work. If we just look at our stores the last 8-9 years, we can see a huge transformation already in terms of how we meet our customers, how we interact with our customers, and we can for sure see that also even more enforcing the sustainability and the circular transformation. This will mean something for how we meet up with our customers, both physically but also online, and what we offer. So I can, without knowing how, I'm quite comfortable in saying that, of course, it will have an impact.
And I imagine we're already today seeing that customers are really interested in these aspects and being able to just use the furniture for longer.
For sure.
Great. Okay, I'm going to move on to Flavien for our final presentation. Flavien is the co-founder of WALD, and please share your presentations with us.
Thanks for inviting us. It's very, very inspiring presentation by major companies. We are like quite smaller, let's say. We are WALD. I founded with my wife, Frederique Barchelard. We spent the last 5 years in London and the past year in Rome, and it's where we studied our practice at the French Academy in Rome, the Villa Medici, and we've been fellow there. And it was a very important time for us because suddenly it was 1 year of time and space to think about like who we are, where we are, and how can we act for the future. We are quite young, so it's in our DNA that we need to develop a practice which is sustainable, and it's really embedded in our practice, both in buildings, in objects, and also in art pieces. Because our practice it's quite wide practices. We're really pushing the boundaries of design and architectures by paintings and making furnitures and spaces and buildings. And our values are really the sustainable values, and they are based in contemporary lifestyles. So lifestyles where your dream is not owning a home with a 30 years credits, but where the freedom of movement, the flexibility of use, the nomadism are like very important keywords and values. And our work is really built around these values. And you can see here on the left some paintings about like really daily situations that are inspiring us. And on the right, one of the furniture for the series we call Furniture for Nomadic Millennials, because we are millennials and we're building and thinking and acting for people from our generation. And these furnitures are like movable furniture, nomadic furnitures that you can take with you and install it in kind of every situation, having a very comfortable furniture. Our first project is called Proto Habitat. So it's been built after a year of research at the French Academy in Rome. So you see on the left the models at the French Academy in Rome, and then in the middle you see the first installation of a one-to-one prototype in Jardin Public de Bordeaux, and on the right the second installation in Chamonix Mont Blanc. And this building is also really embedded our values because it's a fully mountable, dismountable buildings. So it means like you can basically remove it and disassemble it in 3 days with 2 people, and then move it and mount it again in another place with 2 people again between 3 and 5 days. And it's a real house, so it's not a tiny house, it's not like a mobile home, it's not like a temporary house, it's a real timber construction. It's been built with timber that we source ourselves, so it means like every product comes from less than 400 kilometers from the assembly site. So it's also one of the first buildings which is like 100% timber construction and fully mountable, dismountable. So you see here the inside. So you see it's a real construction. You can see also on the floor the Tarkett floor that we use for this building. It was a very interesting collaboration, and still a very interesting collaboration, because developing a fully dismountable technology. You also need to find partners that are able to give you like products that are able to move. And Tarkett was the only floor provider that can provide products that have like a very sleek finish, very sustainable product, and that can be movable and removable for every location. So that was like the beginning of a really interesting conversation. And you see here the step. So you see the building has been mounted and dismounted in Jardin Public. So very constrained public sites. And I love the picture from the right hand side, because you see babies at less than 3 meters of the construction site. So in terms of security, we reach a point where we can really build and rebuild and debuild the building in really constrained sites. And you see also the truck. So it's a really flat pack. So it's a wrinkle to IKEA here, but the building is a flat pack building. So you see on the truck, it fits on one truck, and then you can move the building everywhere you want, basically. It has no foundation, and can be implemented, as you see on the picture, and can be implemented everywhere. So you see here again in Chamonix. So we also play with this idea of like flexible space and flexible use. So the building can be a house, it can be an office, it can be a workshop. Here in Chamonix was a art gallery. And you see again, we just changed the color of the wall, and suddenly the whole atmosphere seems totally different, while it's exactly the same building. So you see again the truck, and which is really important, it's like, this was a prototype, so it's kind of unique to have this building that can be fully dismountable again. And while doing this different site exhibition, we can also prove the viability of our concept. And in January, the prototype is going to be mounted again in Clermont-Ferrand, and it has almost no accidents, nothing. Everything is in perfect state. So for us, it's a very important project, because you can see that we can invent a new type of building that are more mobile, flexible, and really corresponds to a new type of generation of living. Quickly, I will present 2 other projects that are fully inspired by these values of like mountability, dismountability. So this is in Villa Medici in Roma, and this is an agora for 300 people. And it's mountable, dismountable in 1 day, and it's first time that we use like kind of a bubble balloon. So it's and a wood timber structure. So we are going to build this in May in Rome, and it's also like kind of very innovative buildings, because you have this timber construction here, and on the top you have a bubble of like 9 meters, which is flexible and can produce very large space in a very constrained amount of time and people to build this. So you see the model here. So it's now in construction, and it will be displayed in Rome from April, May. next year. And this is another building that we have in Amsterdam. And this time we take the same value as the Proto Habitat, so fully dismountable, fully timber construction. And we push the energy question while working with a new company which is doing flexible solar panel. So it's very interesting because we have 300 square meters of flexible solar panel on the roof, and it's able to make the building totally autonomous in energy while using solar energy. But the very interesting thing is, like, thanks to this flexible solar panel, you can really imagine buildings that are mountable, dismountable really easily. And then the solar panel, because they are flexible, they can also be transported very easily with the building. So you see here the building in a garden, and here some shots of the building. And you see, we always have this kind of language, very simple language of architectures, the simplicity of material, but the ability to show the timber construction, to show how the building is made, and also how the building can be dismantled. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic to see those 3 projects. And so interesting as well that you begin building them at such a scale now, that it's 3 fully realized prototypes that you're the Rome building. When is that going to be built, did you say?
The Amsterdam building is going to be built in May.
Oh, right,
so, yeah. Also, what we like in our practice, it's the same as the Proto Habitat. We basically conceive it, fund it, build it, and open it in 9 months. And the 2 other buildings, we started later this summer, and we are going to build both of them, the one in Amsterdam in March, April, and the one in Rome in May. So you see, it's quite in terms of, like, the way we conceive and the way we build. And we also like this because we are ready to build very fast. And it's also something which is very important because, as you know, building buildings, it's very long. It can take up to 2 or 3 years. But thanks to the technology we are developing, we can really fasten the process of building the buildings. And we, for example, have another project for Saint-Tropez. We are building 30 units of student housing, and we are starting this month, and they are going to be built in April. So it's also very important, like, for us to speed up the construction. And thanks to the technology and the innovation and all the partners we have, we are really ready to be part of speeding the process. And that's also very important in terms of, like, sustainability and being able to be very flexible, because it's what we need. You need to build sustainable buildings, but also you need to be very fast in terms of answering the needs and the new needs, and especially for some urgency, for example.
And I think that's an aspect that we can perhaps start the sort of group discussion with, because something that you all touched on was this idea of designing for flexibility, designing modular buildings, and designing products that can be reused or repurposed once they've reached the end of the life cycle. And obviously that's very visible in the dismountable and mountable buildings. But it's also something that I think at IKEA and Tarkett you're working with, but on a kind of product basis. Could you talk a little bit about this idea about flexible design and how that's potentially becoming a bigger aspect of just the future of materials and what people are buying?
Let's start. Let's say that flexibility is important in a way that enables people to imagine spaces that are flexible for people. It's not just, I think that was interesting. I mentioned something about logistics, and it's very funny how this comes back also in Flavien's words, basically, and this idea of mobility, flexibility is interesting. And so we're actually working on those abilities to, it goes different directions. It could happen in many ways. One could be to, let's say, like Mirza was talking about. That means like you have a product, maybe you can repair it. You have the flexibility to prolong or to make its life longer. So we have solutions where with linoleum or with homogeneous vinyls, which are, let's say, solid materials, we can repair the surface, and so that, you know, if there are some heavy scratches or things like that, then we can do something about it. So that's one way of looking at it. Another way is to say that we can play with modular, and Flavien was mentioning some of the materials that you can install without any glue. So you just like put them on the floor and basically, and that's it. So this is the case for carpet tiles in general matter. This is also a case for some vinyl tiles that we have, but also for some rolls. And this is really interesting that this gives not only the flexibility to install very, very fast, and speed was key also in what Flavien said, and it was interesting. And I'm sure it's very key for IKEA when they talk about, you know, consumers like being able to mount their own furniture on their own and with minimal, let's say, equipment. Same thing here. So it can go very fast and can be also like taken away very fast. Could be reused, could be not reused, but if it's not reused, then it could be recycled very easily because there's no debris, there's no glue thing that's on it. So that's also very comfortable in terms of flexibility again.
Yeah, and obviously for Flavien as an architect to be able to use these kinds of products when designing houses and interiors must be super useful. I'm wondering, Mirza, is it something that you're seeing from IKEA customers as well, that there's more of a demand for these kind of products that can be reused and repurposed?
For sure, and I think that demand has been there underneath the surface all the time, and it's in different aspects. One of the aspects is what I mentioned before about adaptability and really allowing the products to follow the customer's needs along the way, because the needs are not necessarily the same when you have bought the product and 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years after. Life happens, and that's about making the product be still relevant and not obsolete. And it's also about repairability. So imagine that you have a fantastic storage unit, and the drawer, one of the drawer front breaks. That will of course be a shame if you need to at some point throw away the whole storage just because one drawer breaks. So you buy a fantastic new dining table and you have a small kid that makes a risp in the first day, which will of course be a shame when you have a beautiful dining table place. So it's really about meeting the customers on the basis of life and how life is. And it also goes to the assembly. Flavien, you talked a lot about that, and also you, Florian, about enabling products to be disassemblable, to be movable, storable, to be able to follow the customers. Sometimes you change homes, sometimes you pass on the product, sometimes you just simply want to change it from one room to another. And of course, you need to be able to do that without breaking the product, and you need to be able to do that physically in a seamless way, a seamless possible way. So there are many different elements into that, and I recognize very much what the others are saying in the panel.
I think something that comes up quite often is that people are always wondering if we are designing furniture to be more long-lasting, or flooring to be more long-lasting and to ultimately be repaired or reused, is that going to push prices up? Is it going to be more expensive for someone to buy a piece of furniture that is modular and can be reassembled or repurposed?
To design a furniture that is expensive and sustainable, or expensive and durable, that is a no-brainer. But I think we need to challenge ourselves much more than that. And it is really about making products affordable. And it's not necessarily opposing in any kind of way. Sometimes you need to think beyond and push yourself. And sometimes it's quite evident that it actually goes hand in hand. I think it is in our task to figure that out together with our partners and others.
Yeah, we had an audience question that's sort of touching on that as well, where Sebastian's wondering, do the panelists have any tips on how consumers can differentiate between actual sustainable products and products that are just greenwashing? That's maybe one for Florian and Mirza more than Flavien, but if you please, yeah, go ahead.
This is a real interesting question, because we We ourselves are fighting against that in the way that again we are in action. We are not just like buying, like say, carbon credits. We are actually putting things into action in terms of getting the material back and recycling it. I think part of it is also a question, and that was very well said in Mirza's presentation in terms of the language, the definitions, and let's say the laws or the legislation. There are already quite a number of things that we can do, and for instance, we are editing and we are very transparent about that on the composition of our materials. We call like EPDs, following like the cradle-to-cradle principle that we are like something like 98% of our material being appraised for that. So it's extremely transparent of what we're doing. So that's the first step of like, what are we doing and where are, and then of course, then the question of how can we go on and improve that? That's of course part of the game, but let's say that's being transparent, editing and publishing what you're actually doing and to the public. That's the first step. And then in terms of making the right choice in terms of what is best for the environment for our CO2 emissions, there are some rules that are already out there in terms of what you can measure, but then let's say that not everyone is using the same terms or exactly the same, let's say, boundaries to say, okay, the CO2, is it like from there to there or from there to there, depending on the life cycle of the material. And I think there's a lot of progress coming up. I think it's going to come very quickly. Yes, we can expect a lot from legislation to re-clarify this for the consumers in the future.
To add a bit to that, I think there are different layers to this that is really important to happen. Of course, the consumers are a very important force here to put expectations on companies, to put demands on legislators to really take actions. Then today we also know that in the real life there are thousands and thousands of different kind of marking that is for most of the consumers quite unclear, and for the normal average Joe or Jane, it is very hard to take time and inform yourself about the background of every single product that you buy every day, everything from groceries to bigger purchases. So I think that is an unfair kind of situation, and here it is important that companies take their responsibility to actively work on the agenda, to team up, to contribute to the legislators, to team up with other companies as well. And also, in the end, it needs to be some sort of a harmonization of definitions. So we really talk about the same language and that it's simple for the consumers, that in a blink of an eye understand how is this product versus that product. Just as you understand the price difference, just as you understand the visual difference, that you also can understand the sustainability difference, and through that make conscious choices. So it's many different aspects to this, but at some point we need to make that simple for the customers.
Yeah. And Flavien, is this something that you've seen in your architecture practice as well? Are clients, or when you're creating buildings, do you feel like there's a higher demand now for things like locally sourced materials and eco-friendly housing designs?
Yeah, definitely. But we are the changing generation. We really act as an actor of change, and for us there is no way to go back to old habits. So that's why we basically build everything in timber construction, and we try to use eco and sourced materials as much as we can. And all of our projects are developing different collaboration, because we are not the only one, and there is a very exciting changing generation, a new generation appearing on the market, but also appearing in the industry. So if you look today, you have like plenty of new of new people, of new industry, but also old industry that are turning into like a new generation change. And it's a very exciting time for us, because we really focus and dedicate in building in a sustainable way, and we kind of embrace this situation. And all of our clients, all of our collaborators, all of the brands we are working with, they're all sharing the same values. So for us, we're already in this dynamic of change, and we try with every project to promote new type of materials. And it's a challenge. For example, this flexible solar panel. They've been developed for 10 years and they're arriving on the market in January. So imagine. And we're really keen to use it as a first building in this size. And but it's also a challenge. Every project for us is a challenge because you have these new products and you also kind of testing prototype. That was the same for Tarkett. I mean, when we approached Tarkett, we have these guidelines, and you know, it was not so much product that you can use for fully dismantleable buildings, but we discuss, we try, we meet, and we finally find the right product for the right building. And this research and development takes a long time, takes a lot of energy, but you always meet very interesting people in very interesting company. So yeah, for us, it's really embedded in our values to work only with sustainable materials. And of course, with this ethos and with this philosophy, you only meet clients who wants to share these values with you.
Do you find as well that it sounds like you're finding it easier now than perhaps it would have been, say, 5 or 10 years ago to find the sustainable materials that suits your design, that there's enough kind of attractive options now for you to be able to design attractive buildings like the Proto Habitat? And do you think that's something that's going to continue to happen, that we'll continue to see quite aesthetically pleasing green designs as more companies get involved in it?
Yeah, that's why I say we are living very exciting time, because it's true that 10 years ago the world was not the same. Like, I mean, now we have a huge and sharp conscience of the climate change, and there is a kind of a revolution about materials and technology. So we are really in this kind of changing points where, like 5 years ago, this would be very difficult, and now you have many companies, big companies and small actors that are sharing the same dynamic. So yeah, and at the same time, we're still at the beginning, let's say, because you see that most of the products are still not fully sustainable, and there is still a lot of steps to do, but also more technically. Sometimes, you know, when you build proper building, you have like a lot of guidelines and security and all different aspects that are also not easy to implement, because, for example, when you build proper housing and you want to use new sustainable materials, you most of the time blocked by regulations. So there is always a balance between what you want to do, what you can do, and you really have to play with that. But that's also the exciting part of the project. And maybe one last thing, our practice, we really balance the high tech and the low tech. So it means like Proto Habitat is really using very classical timber construction. So we are not reinventing timber construction, but what we're inventing is the mountability and dismountability. So the technology is basically in the connection, and that's also like very inspiring for IKEA, because you're using very traditional carpentry, let's say, but the technology that we developed is like the connection, and it's everywhere in our practice. It's a balance between high tech and low tech, and I think that's also very an attitude of our generation. You're not forgetting where you come from, but you're also embracing what you can do with the actual technology.
Mm. That's really promising and quite a positive thing to hear. And for big companies such as IKEA and Tarkett, that's kind of must be interesting to you, this idea of how can you do things at a bigger scale? How can you make sure that more architects like Flavien have access to materials and products that are more eco-friendly and sustainable?
Well, let's say this is the story of the circular selection that I mentioned, meaning that part of it is due to that we need to clarify the language, and that's what we're trying to do with that selection, with giving more information about those specific materials. At the same time, it's important to make them accessible, meaning that they know that they can find in there, that those products. And of course, we need the discussion that we have with our clients help us to engage with the dialogue, engage with the trust, and say, okay, this is what we do. We have them visiting us in our plants to show them how we do things and so on and so forth, of course. But I'd say that the idea behind that was really about making sure that there's something accessible and that we are making an effort here to make that story of circularity tangible and real, actionable. Again, I mean, this is for us, it's a challenge because, again, I mean, besides making some nice discussion about circularity, there's a real challenge for us to get those materials back into our plants so that we can actually feed and decrease the CO2 emissions. I mean, the first slide I showed, like the 75%, this is there. So how can we decrease? There's no other way around, typically. And that's why we want people to use our material more, yes, but then be sure that once they use it, they can return it back so that we can feed for the new generation of materials again and again and again. So that's really the story.
So it's about communicating that aspect to customers as well.
It's not just us. We do our share. It's also our consumers that needs to be aware of that, what they can do, the customers, the prescribers. And then I think it's like we are at the very, very beginning, and Florian, like said it very well, we're at the very beginning of this adventure. It's not like overnight that this happened. As you can imagine, there's a lot of work behind this, probably like more than 10 years, I would say. But then this is not starting now, and we need that wheel to move on and to accelerate the movement on and on and on. And we see that we have growing number of partners we work with to enable that. We are partnering with Rania Cells, let's say in Estonia, where they have these ashes of let's say burned oil sands and rocks, and they don't know what to do with it. And for us, it's wow, there's plenty of calcium in it. We can use it for many fillers in our construction. So, and we are finding partners like this. I think this is really new, that this collaboration between companies that for once, some of their material going to be perceived as, let's say, wastes. And for these wastes can be perceived as nutrients. So we are really in the circularity or cradle philosophy. And this is fairly new, and this takes time. I think that the process today is more like holistic, that we meet each other, it's like, wow, we have something to say to each other. Hopefully this process will be more, let's say, automatic, and there might be some flat platforms, and I know that there are coming platforms of people having, hey, here I have this, maybe somebody can use it as a nutrients for future, I don't know, furniture, material, houses, you name it. Yeah, I mean, it's very exciting because the beginning, definitely it is. I agree.
Yeah. Mirza, how is that from your side? Sorry.
It is very much in the same line of thoughts. It is about change. It is about being on the way. It's about testing, daring to make mistakes, learn from them, and just continue that journey. Always pushing forward, always doing more. And I like a little bit about what Flavien said as well around, honoring where we come from, because that's a mass of learning and knowledge that we can utilize. But it's also about embracing the tomorrow and really rethink things and think in different ways. So we are not forcing a square-shaped peg into a round hole, but we really are rethinking things and approaching completely differently around it. And once again, it goes back to the transparency to the customers and the offers that you enable, the choices you enable the customers. But it's also about how you deal with your own internal operations, how you deal with your partners. For example, in IKEA, we have 1,000 first-tier suppliers or so. It is really about the dialogue we have with them. What is that based on, and how does that look? And what are the demands we put on them? What are the demands on the second-tier suppliers in terms of the sourcing, about the materials, about where they come from, how we utilize them, the waste, the energy, all of that. It's many different things, and not all of that is about always using that as some sort of a sales pitch. It's about taking your responsibility as a responsible company or a responsible person as a piece of the puzzle in the world as well.
That's wonderful. I think that's a really nice, optimistic note to end on. It sounds like everyone's kind of doing a good job at trying to make things a little bit better, like time after time. And yeah, I want to thank you all for joining us here today. And yeah, just great to speak to you and hear about what's happening in the industry at large. And I will hopefully speak to you at some point soon again in the future.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much, Cajsa.
Hey, thanks for your.
Thank you, Florian, Mirza, and Flavien.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.